Look, the Academy Awards may not be perfect, alright? They may be a bit exclusionary, they may be mired in industry politics, they may sideline important film forms like documentary and animation, but check out all these skinny guys in fat suits. Very cool. It's kind of tiring to rag on the Oscars at this point, because like everyone's done it already. As an animation fan especially, I've heard and agreed with every possible argument against the truly ignorant way the Academy approaches cartoons, and yeah, I agree. It is annoying to see voters just openly admit that they didn't watch the nominees and voted for the Pixar one because their kid liked it. But if it's so important to us that interesting original animation gets recognized at what is essentially the McDonald's of award shows, why don't we ever talk about the other animated Oscar category? I didn't realize this until like last award season, but Best Animated Short has been an award at the Oscars for 90 years, and I've seen virtually none of these movies, and neither of you, and that is majorly weird. I mean, I've seen some of the winners, like The Wrong Trousers is easily one of the best animated shorts of all time. That movie goes so hard. Gromit was robbed, but I have to know, what is going on here? Are we the problem? Are the nominees the problem? Why does Best Animated Short fly under the radar every single year? And is it really a showcase of under-recognized talent, or is it just a little box the Academy checks so they can seem artsy and relevant? So I watched all the nominees from the 2023 award season, and I'm gonna rank them because I think it's funny. Not on a tier list, but still against each other arbitrarily according to my own picky, annoying tastes. And yes, the ceremony was months ago, but I haven't actually watched it yet, and I don't know who won, so at the end I'll react live to the announcement, and we'll see if my top pick matches up with the auspicious Academy's pick. Would it surprise you to learn that this video was supposed to come out before the Oscars? Such a YouTuber moment for me. It's giving Christmas special sheepishly uploaded in February. Let's get started. First on the list is Ice Merchants, directed and scored by the same guy, Joao Gonzalez. That's pretty interesting. What a talented man. By the way, do you like my very professional looking rant Sona? My highly technologically advanced VTuber rig? Anyway, Ice Merchants is a story about a father and son who live on a treacherous mountain harvesting ice blocks, and it's gorgeous. It's very satisfying to watch this grainy, textured, almost illustrative visual style and motion. I'm not usually that into minimalism, but this is the good, purposeful type of minimalism where like every visual design element at play serves a specific narrative purpose. Just looking at color alone, right? You've got the red-blue contrast positioning the setting as antagonistic to the characters. You've got these scattered little pops of yellow gently foreshadowing important plot stuff that will become relevant later. You've got all these lean, spare visual storytelling tropes that are pieced together really, really well. But I will say all of those individual pieces are treading pretty well-worn territory. It feels a little safe aesthetically, especially compared to some of the later nominees. I think I'm just personally kind of fatigued with the like mid-2010s magazine illustration look. This is a personal point. I don't know if this makes sense. But the New Yorker watermark in the corner of the version I watched almost made it look like it was an illustration drawn for a New Yorker article about, like, I don't know, self-care in the age of climate change or something stupid like that. I know this won't cheapen it for most people. This is a highly personal nitpick. I'm doing it. I'm already doing it. The thing is, the execution really does shine through anyway. There's some very cool match cuts. There are quite a few little moments of quiet character intimacy that added a lot for me, and for every image that's too on the nose, there's a more interesting one to make up for it. I especially like the density of info in this shot from around 5 minutes. The diving scenes are the big highlight. The character falling into void motif might be a little overused at this point, but the truth is I never get tired of it, especially when the foreshortening is off the chain like this. Get a load of those fingies. So while Ice Merchants never really surprised me, it did win me over by the end. The ending itself is very bittersweet, even if the relationship between the father and the son characters feels a little bit underexplored. It does come together. So I'm putting it at the bottom, which is also the top, because this is the first entry in the list. Next up we have the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse. Now, Boy Mole Fox Horse asks, what if Christopher Robin was a sensitive e-boy who only spoke in Instagram captions? If Ice Merchants is a little bit over-reliant on convention, then the boy, etc. is chugging it. The boy is truly crushing it. The dialogue here is what you might call majorly derivative of Winnie the Pooh and Wind in the Willows. It's not great. It's not bad to be a derivative in and of itself. Most of the films we're looking at today are, to some extent. But in Mole Boy, the characters' conversations don't feel motivated by anything other than their need to be children's lit characters very nebulously. There's like no sense of momentum or rhythm or cause and effect to character interactions, which is a problem because most of this movie is character interaction. Pacing wise, there's kind of a babysitter half-heartedly attempting improv while playing toys vibe. Everyone's just like, what are you doing? I don't know. Maybe we should try going here. Okay then. I love you.
So, what are we doing?
We're on a quest for cake.
Well, let's get going then.
I respect that even a short film can choose to take its time and move slowly, but if you're gonna insist on shoving all these action set pieces into a half hour, you need to make the downtime feel meaningful too, not hopelessly meandering. And it's not meaningful, it's generic, it's indistinct, and everyone's just dribbling out these super vague platitudes about love and home, which I'm not even against necessarily, but I watch direct-to-video baby movies for fun. But you have to at least make a token attempt to earn it, in my opinion.
What's the bravest thing you've ever said?
Help. Asking for help isn't giving up.
Apparently it's based on a book, which makes sense, because everything besides the plot and dialogue is wonderful. The way the mole moves is so precious and full of detail. He's so small. The character animation thankfully does a lot to fill the gaps left by the writing. Except the horse. Horse looks a little spoinky sometimes, but that's okay because horses are notoriously hard to animate. You know, no hard feelings. I'm just saying it's no Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. The art direction is unambitious, but it's still engaging to look at thanks to strong composition, and the actual animation style itself is so buttery and chocolatey. I like how it captures the varied line weights of an ink brush, and there are these like very appealing curly Q speed lines floating around the characters during action scenes that I wish had been used more. I hate to say it, but I think Boy Mode Fox Girl would be a lot more atmospheric and affecting if it were silent, which might sound really mean, but I choose to see it as a credit to the animators. It does develop and feel less thin as it goes on, but every time I start getting into it, the boys' design just cracks me up all over again. Literally, they yassified Christopher Robin. How could they do this? What am I supposed to do with this? I can see why someone would enjoy the bull, the boy, the mole, the
Cake.
fox, and the horse. There are some sweet moments here, or at least the suggestion of sweet moments, but ultimately it's just a little too proud of itself for me to connect with it emotionally. It's like an English children's literature flavored La Croix. It's like Cocomelon for New York Times subscribers. More like the cringe in the Willows, if you ask me. Okay, I'm done. I'm putting it below Ice Merchants, but I didn't hate it. Third on our list is An Ostrich Told Me the World is Fake, and I Think I Believe It. This is a student film, which is pretty cool, especially considering how difficult it can be to work in stop motion, even with a full team of industry professionals. So there's a lot of expertise at work here, but what its status as a student film means is it carries all the positive and negative baggage associated with being a student film. On the positive side, the camera monitor being in the shot in so many of these important images is a really strong visual concept that anchors the big narrative conceit of a stop motion figure realizing he's in a movie. And the idea of using images you normally only see in like behind the scenes material for story purposes is hella inventive. This would never happen in like a typical Hollywood production. I also really like the horror elements, and I like that they're played straight and explored in a way that grounds you in the protagonist's perspective. It would have been so easy to make it like a lame, ironic robot chicken thing.
Gummy bear, gummy bear!
And the ostrich design, that's the ostrich from the title, by the way, is actually pretty unsettling. It's the best figure in the movie for sure, and I think that was the right place to direct that effort. I love to see a student film, or any short film, work around budgetary constraints in such a smart way. It doesn't matter that you can see some of the seams here, because these characters and sets have to look constructed for the story to even work at all. On the neutral to negative side of being a student film, an ostrich wears its influences very visibly on its sleeve. It's riffing on The Matrix, which is pretty cute. The human character designs are very much early Aardman. They've got that Watts Pig type beat, which I'm not against, but it's also clearly inspired by Charlie Kaufman's screenwriting, as far as I can see. And I respect the ambition of trying to imitate something like that that's so multi-layered and meta-contextual, but it's hard to do without losing some swag in the process, maybe coming across a little bit fanboy-esque. It's starting to occur to me that like smaller movies honored at the Oscars are pretty inevitably going to feel derivative a lot of the time, because some element of them needs to be recognizable to the voters for it to succeed. But this kind of self-referentiality and the idea of an animator as a godlike character affecting the narrative is actually really common in stop motion animation specifically, probably because of the medium itself, right? You know, it's hard not to feel like a god moving all these little guys around, but to be honest, I've seen it done better. In movies from decades ago. This is the exact subject of a moral oral essay I've been wanting to write. Some of the reveals and images near the end add some personality and thematic completion to the whole film. I particularly like the shot where all the different protagonist figures are strobing into each other like an oscilloscope. There is something here. An ostrich told me the world is fake is just unassuming and uncool in a way that I found refreshing. When I read the blurb, I thought it would just be smarmy and self-satisfied, but it was obviously a huge labor of love, as many student films are. It didn't quite hit the mark for me, but it's super competent and somewhat clever, and I'm putting it above Boy Fox, but not by a ton. Next up, The Flying Sailor feels like a more Canadian, more experimental take on Ice Merchants. Again, the central image is a man's body falling through space, surrounded by objects and memories that hint at the contents of his life. But here, it's in a historical setting based on an actual sailor who was blown into the sky by a dynamite explosion and survived miraculously. But more importantly, the style is much looser and more impressionistic, and so are its influences. The shot right after the explosion looks to me like it's quoting experimental filmmaker Stan Brakhage, who used mixed media to make these abstract textural short films by pasting plant matter and moth wings onto actual film stock, which is great because Stan's the fucking man. Love that guy. This is the good kind of derivative, in my highly biased opinion. I'm just a sucker for mixed media in general, so I really liked the combination of 3D, 2D, and live action visuals that Flying Sailor used. Although I feel like the 3D elements could have been better incorporated. They look a little generic. That might have been intentional though, because I found that the effect of the mixture was that the sailor himself, the subject here, was emphasized as a clear focal point. More than anything, The Flying Sailor is a visual study of this man's body, and that's what I liked about it so much. It turns this fleshy cartoon shape flapping in the wind into an arrestingly beautiful moving sculpture. There's a very, very sculptural sense of volume to his form. And while they gesture at his life, it's not trying to be like a character thing where we learn the tragic truth about who he was before the accident. That would have been kind of pathetic, in my opinion. It's more about putting you in the shoes of someone experiencing a brush with death, and it spins it into something much broader thematically, where like the sailor's ascent and descent through space kind of signify the highs and lows of life. It's not as satisfying narratively or as methodical as Ice Merchants, but I found it way freer and more original. And I gotta say, this is my favorite so far. We'll see if it can be dethroned by our final movie. And that movie is none other than My Year of Dicks. I left this one for last, partially because the buzz is that it's going to win, and partially because it addresses sex and has the word dick in the title, and YouTube is a website for tiny babies. My Year of Dicks was a pleasant surprise. Coming-of-age memoirs about sexual awakening are hard to write. I think that's like a pretty safe opinion. And I was sort of worried that this would be like a thoughtlessly positive girl boss thing, which was pretty unkind of me in retrospect, but I can't help being jaded. Okay, life makes haters of us all. But the movie really has a lot to say about men, about consent culture, about the construct of virginity, and how quickly we seem to have forgotten the insane obsession American youth culture had with it as recently as 15 or 20 years ago, and may yet again. And with a couple exceptions, it makes its comments without over-editorializing, which I really respected. The dialogue is smart and real and knows when to leave room for subtext. I could do without the voiceover, but that's again a personal preference, and it's fitting for the video diary framing device it's going for. The framing is, on the surface, the aspect of Year of Dicks that sets it apart the most. It's quoting all different kinds of visual styles associated with the 90s, which is, you know, when it takes place. A lot of home video footage and grungy zine graphics and stuff like that. Different genre trappings are used to illustrate the different ways Pam, the main character, romanticizes her crushes and herself in different parts of her teenage years. One phase of her life will be a gothic romance, and then another is like a horny French art film. You get the idea. It gets at this very fundamental truth about teenagers growing up in a hyper-saturated, hyper-real media environment, which is that most of them experience every part of the growing up process through the lens of entertainment, of fantasy. And so the stylistic playfulness of My Year of Dicks feels very thematically substantial because it's giving us a crystal clear window into the different ways young women are passively manipulated into saying yes to things they don't want because of how their expectations have been set by entertainment products, which is like a really sophisticated thing to try and convey in such a short amount of time. However, I think some of these stylistic tangents are stronger than others. The anime one is like a really cute idea, right? To show Pam's youthful excitement momentarily breaking through her fake aloof exterior by having her transform into a Genki girl shoujo anime protagonist. But these faux anime visuals in Western productions always kind of give me echoes of like early 2000s how to draw manga books, and it's not committed enough to that to convince me it was on purpose. Some of these shots look really good and accurate, you know, if you compare them to like Sailor Moon or something, but some of them look like just a straight up Adult Swim anime parody. Some of them have serious Kappa Mikey energy, and I can't decide if I love or hate that about it. Not to be a gatekeeper or whatever, it feels like the anime style was chosen just to make it more eclectic and topical. It's not like anime storytelling tropes had a chokehold on American girlhood in 1991. They do now, I guess, but if we're going to reference other animation, I feel like it was a missed opportunity to not examine the ways that Disney movies shaped young girls born in the 70s and 80s, because that effect really is profound on Gen Xers and elder millennials. But I guess that critique feels kind of lame and hackneyed now, because like we're in a post-BuzzFeed feminism world, and it's already been done to death. Ultimately, though, the whole film works anyway, because the main style is loose, scratchy, rotoscoping type thing that lends itself to messy, unpredictable change that this kind of stylistic mishmash demands. It really nails the idiosyncrasies of each character's facial expressions, which is something I think a lot of rotoscoped animation fails at, so it was cool to see some of the unique face poses and lighting effects and stuff at play here. But I think sometimes the animation and the imaginative visuals try just a little bit too hard to tell the audience something that they could have picked up on their own. The constant visual noise is clearly a choice that was made, which is a lot better than if it had been an accident, probably, but I think didactic visuals can be almost as much of a buzzkill as didactic dialogue. The best written scene in the movie is a conversation near the end when Pam's dad appears for the first time, sits her down for just a very, very uncomfortable sex talk, and his blunt, casual, probably well-meaning ignorance and misogyny is absolutely bone-chilling. That banal type of sober, disinterested sexism where there isn't like a big bad guy to point fingers at. There's no cackling CEO, manipulating his secretary. It's just a lot of these miserable, unimaginative cogs in a social machine that's been running autonomously for thousands of years. That's something you don't see represented in mainstream feminist fiction too often because it's really hard to pull off. And by God, they pull it off. And throughout this whole monologue, Pam is losing it emotionally, as she should. She's turning into jelly, and her ears are flying off and exploding, and there's blood everywhere. And her father is pushed way to the back of the sound mix. And I see exactly why that choice was made. It puts us into Pam's shoes as a character. It gives us an immediate audiovisual experience of what's happening in her head, which is very important, and I think must have been the priority. But I really think it would have been stronger if, for this one moment, the fantasy embellishment had dropped away to make space for the writing, which is exceptional. You wouldn't even need to completely toss it, just like make it a little less on the nose. To be clear, I do feel silly giving script notes to a short film that's probably going to win an Oscar, but I see this type of feedback more as a way of understanding a movie than like a genuine claim that I could have done it better. Obviously, I couldn't and wouldn't. Anyway, the ending is predictable but very sweet. I appreciated Dick's balancing act between bleakness and sentimentality. I think it's true to the feeling of being a teen, and it's true to the cultural moment we're living in right now, kind of that meta-modernism type of vibe. My Year of Dicks was my favorite movie of the bunch. I'm not going to pull any punches here. I think it's going to win the Oscar. The only other worthy film on the list, in my mind, is The Flying Sailor, but Dix is a lot more grounded and character-focused, so I think it really does stand a better chance. Let's see if I was right. Okay, this is the last call. Place your bets.
It's one nominee even managed to fit in an entire year's worth of...
Is that Pedro Pascal? Oh my god.
What, Pedro? Here are the nominees for Best...
So it's gotta be My Year of Dicks, right? He even made a joke about it.
Ice Merchants, Joao Gonzalez and Bruno
Gonzalez.
Quintana.
I mispronounced that. Moment of truth.
And the Oscar goes to... The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, Charlie Mackesy, and Matthew
What?
Lloyd.
The animation team behind
Okay.
The Boy, the Mole, the Fox,
Okay,
and the
okay.
Horse.
Well, I shouldn't be fucking surprised. They picked the worst one. They picked the worst one.
So this is bewildering.
Yeah, you're telling me, dude. Look at this fucking Steven Pinker looking motherfucker.
Anyway, thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Well, that's an interesting resolution to that. I don't have a silver lining for this. I'm kind of appalled. It was fun to watch through all these short films, but maybe this wasn't the right place to be looking for weird crap, Like writing this has reminded me of all the filters a movie has to pass through before it can even be considered for an Oscar. I think I'm more into work that's like either way more or way less conventional instead of resting right in the middle in the elusive prestige zone. If I had an Oscars, if I was the Oscars, my personal Oscar goes to Felix Colgrave for his short film Donks. Literally, it's better than any of these. The Oscars don't matter, but if he doesn't get a 2024 Best Animated Short nomination, I am literally going to break into Jack Nicholson's house and I'm going to spray all his clothes with essential oils, and it's going to be so overstimulating for him. He's going to have a fucking meltdown, and it's just going to be the news story of the century.